Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. We got a great guest on the line, a returning guest coming back on. We talked to Doug Casey in the middle of March, kind of the onset of when everything was breaking down during the coronavirus. And we're talking to him now in July as we're seeing this second wave really start to hit the news, and people are trying to figure out where the pieces of the puzzle are going to settle. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome in Doug Casey to the show of Casey Research and International Man. Check out his blog there. Legendary investor and one of the greatest personalities and authorities in the resource space. And it's a great time to bring him on to articulate what is going on around the world and the tyrannies that we're seeing. I mean, so many of the things he's talked about, we're seeing roll out now in 2020. So Doug Casey, thanks so much for coming on the show with me today.
A pleasure, Donegan, as always.
Doug, we're seeing basically the Twilight Zone. Like I said in the introduction here, tyranny. You've articulated this so much throughout the years. And, I think it might have glazed over some people's eyes, but watching the breakdown right now in 2020, I mean, what do you make of this at the moment?
Well, I'd say it's actually predictable. Look, it depends on the time scale and the time frame you want to use. But I may have mentioned this in some past conversation with you that Western civilization itself seems to me to have peaked just before World War I, and it's been going downhill since then. Now, at the same time that's been going on, technology has been improving, and in fact, it's been accelerating. So things have gotten better in some ways, but gotten worse in some other, and I think more serious ways. So where's it go from here? Well, we've had the hysteria with global warming, and now we have the hysteria with COVID, and they're both phony as far as I'm concerned. And I speak as somebody who's been a science aficionado his whole life. I'm not a scientist, but I am a science aficionado lifelong. And both of these things seem like borderline hoaxes to me. And both of them, this COVID thing is a giant step towards destroying the world's economy. It's the world's economy has been a bubble in search of a pin, but with this virus hysteria, it's actually found a sledgehammer instead of a pin. So I'm pretty pessimistic about the next few years.
So what are your thoughts on this second wave talk? I mean, we went through this and there was some optimism that things were getting better. We saw the 50 best trading days in the stock market. Things were starting to come around. And then now the media is hyping the second wave. They're pointing towards cases rising, but not talking about fatalities collapsing anymore. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's a very good point you make. Cases going up is essentially meaningless. It's much like the normal seasonal flu, which in a typical year kills 40 to 60,000 people, just the normal seasonal flu. That's deaths, but there are many hundreds of thousands or many millions of cases of the normal seasonal flu. And this is the same thing. Cases of COVID it's fairly meaningless, just like cases of the normal seasonal flu are fairly meaningless. It's the deaths that count, and the deaths from COVID, which are, I think, being greatly overreported to start with for many reasons, and most of those deaths are old people and people with pre-existing serious conditions, but they're reported as COVID things anyway. Not to mention the fact that these nursing home disasters in New York and New Jersey, where they put old people in nursing homes where they were bound to get the flu. It's, look, hysteria is the problem, not the flu itself. Put it that way.
Doug, do you think that this is some sort of behind the scenes plan or agenda to mandate some sort of vaccine to roll out and inject people's bodies with some foreign object?
Well, I just don't know. Look, when Edward Jenner just created a vaccine for smallpox 200 years ago, it was one of the great advances in medical history. That was one thing. But now a kid gets 40, 50, 60, 80 vaccinations in his first 6 months. It's really gone quite overboard. And they try to influence people to get a vaccination for the normal seasonal flu. And it would seem that that's only about 20 to 40% effective. So it's a waste of time and money. And generally speaking, it's a mistake to put foreign substances into your body unless there's a clear and compelling reason to do so. So what am I going to do? I'm not planning on getting the vaccine. Of course, what I understand is that many governments are going to make it mandatory. Now, I don't know how they're going to force their populations to take the vaccine. Probably they will deny you entrance to large events. You'll have to have a vaccine passport, or to travel on planes or trains. You'll have to have a vaccine passport. So it's really horrible. It's just another form of people control. And if you're conspiratorially oriented, I tend not to be, just because I find that it's too hard to get 3 friends to just agree on what movie to see. Well, people don't see movies anymore, but let's say go to dinner, what restaurant to go to. It's much harder to get hundreds of miscreants around the world to work ensemble on something like this. This is a hysteria comparable to the witch trials of the late 17th century. And I hope it doesn't turn into something, the kind of mass hysteria that seized China during the 60s under Mao. Anything's possible today, though, I suppose. I don't think it's a conspiracy per se. I think what we're dealing with here is that, the people that run the world, generally horrible people. You get the worst kind of people that get into government, not the best type, the worst type of people. They have the same Weltanschauung, they have the same backgrounds, the same education. So they tend to believe the same things. They get together at places like the UN and the OECD and trade memes with each other. So conspiracy, no, but predictable, yeah.
Yeah, understood. Doug, when it comes to these millennials spending their stimulus checks on the stock market, I mean, there's this record amount of participants in the stock market right now. So you got to assume all these millennials are using this stimulus check and throwing money at these tech giants, Zoom and Facebook and Amazon and Google. And I mean, my goodness, what do you make of this as they're entering the market with these companies largely going to see future revenues collapsing, maybe more expensive now than ever before in history? I mean, what do you make of this scenario?
Well, I think the stock market as a whole is grossly overpriced. It's in the same kind of bubble territory that it was back in 2001. So I wouldn't touch a common stock with a 10-foot pole at this point. Although common stocks are probably better values than bonds, which are in a hyperbubble. But look, the resurgence of the stock market is largely caused by the trillions of new dollars that are being created in Washington. And of course, this is happening all over the world too. So it's a monetary phenomenon. It has nothing to do with value or growth. It has to do with printing money up, and it's going to end very badly.
Yeah, what a dynamic we're seeing in bonds. Gold is the second best performing asset in 2020, second to the 30-year Treasury bond, which is, quite the irony when you consider if I was to describe to you what we were going to see in 2020, with trillions of dollars being printed, billions of people locked down, and just businesses going bankrupt, and what the Fed's response is going to be, you wouldn't assume that gold would be only at 1,800. You wouldn't assume the stock market would be where it's at, but here we are.
Well, the question, to my way of thinking, gold is really about the safest place to be today. It's not at giveaway levels like it was in 2001. Because in 2001, when it was about $250, $260 an ounce, it was actually cheaper then than it was at $35 an ounce back in 1971. Okay, so since then, price of gold's gone up 6 times. And since 2001, the general price level has doubled, approximately, let's say. So the real price of gold has tripled. Well, still, gold is a good value because the world is on much more dangerous footing than it was 20 years ago. So yeah, I think gold is reasonable value, not giveaway value, but very reasonable value with a lot of upside potential, where it is now at 1750, 1800, whatever it is, that area. Especially the gold stocks, they're real values because there's hardly a producing gold mine in the world that has all-in sustaining costs, which is the best broad general measure of what costs are, of more than $1,000 an ounce. But gold is over 1,700. So the mining industry, which is basically a really crappy industry for a lot of reasons we could talk about separately, gold mines are coining money right now. I think the public is going to pile into them. And the people that are buying Hertz, which is bankrupt, or for that matter, buying Amazon, which if it grows any further, it's going to subsume the entire solar system. I think they're going to pile into gold stocks, especially when we start seeing retail inflation, which we will, unless we have a credit collapse, of course, which is also a possibility. I'm really just betting on economic and financial chaos more than inflation or deflation, either one. Could be both at the same time in different parts of the economy, of course.
Doug, as you mentioned, the miners are catching a bid, and both of us are longtime shareholders of Amir Nani's company, Gold Mining Inc. Obviously, Amir was very aggressive during the bear market, making strategic acquisitions in the Americas. In this environment, with gold moving higher, the miners starting to get some confidence behind them. What are your thoughts on gold mining specifically?
I think it's going to be a winner, a big winner in the coming bull market. And the reason I say that is because, well, I have the 8 Ps that I use to analyze gold stocks: people, property, politics, push, financing with the Ps. Number 1 is people. And Amir is a first-class guy. So I would automatically bet on any deal that he's running. So that's a big reason why Gold Mining Inc. is going to become a big winner in the coming bull market in these gold stocks. Another reason is that he's tied up about 15 million ounces of resources. Those are not to say reserves, but resources. But with proper drilling, most of that's going to turn into reserves and will turn into mines. Gold Mining Inc. is a tremendous acquisition candidate for a major mining company at this point. And I think that's what Amir's plans will be, rather than trying to produce himself, which is a whole other thing.
You know, one thing you mentioned previously is gold is not trading at giveaway prices anymore. And I mean physical gold, not the ticker symbol GOLD. But what is your thoughts on the runway that a lot of these miners might have? You know, we might be in the fifth or sixth inning maybe when it comes to the price of gold, but a lot of times in these speculative bubbles, or when things get into these speculative bubbles, the bottom of the ninth inning is where a lot of this action happens. So maybe speak to that.
Well, you're quite correct. Major bull markets usually look like hyperbolic curves. In other words, they start out slowly and they grow and they grow. And then once it hits the knee, they almost go vertical. And in gold markets in the past, the gold stocks are the most volatile part of the market. They're much more volatile than tech stocks. And in past bull markets, which we've had 5 or 6 major ones since gold was released back in 1971, the market as a whole has gone up 10 to 1, 1,000%, with a lot of individual stocks going up 100 times. And actually, I have personally owned 2 stocks that went up 1,000 times. As unbelievable as that may sound, just in the course of a bull market. I'm not talking over the course of a lifetime. I think it could happen again this time. I think this is going to be one for the record books. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm really seeing gold hit 1,800 recently and moving higher. We continue to have this confidence that's getting instilled in the market, and it largely due to the destruction of the underlying economy. And we have a situation now where there's a larger discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots. You know, the bigger companies are getting bigger while the small mom and pop shops are getting crushed, and, you know, the transfer of wealth that's happening there. You know, going through this COVID crash, this economic crash, I mean, what are your thoughts on how easy it would be to roll out some sort of universal basic income of $2,000 a month, or free healthcare to a vulnerable population that, you know, whether they call themselves conservative or liberal, progressive, Republican, Democrat, it seems like everyone's got their hand out at the moment.
Well, you're quite correct. And in the November elections, I made a money bet with Marin Katusa. I bet that Trump was going to win. This time, this November, I hate to say this, but it looks to me, even with the brain dead Joe Biden running, and even with a black female as a vice president, chances are excellent the Democrats are going to win for 2 reasons. They're promising a lot more free stuff, and they're much better at stuffing the ballot boxes, which is actually going to be a major determinant this time around. If the Democrats win, speaking to what you said, which I think they will, yes, we're going to have free medical care and guaranteed basic income. Yeah, they're going to do all that stuff. Absolutely. You're going to have this ridiculous notion of modern monetary theory, basically the unlimited printing of money. All this is going to happen. But even if Trump wins this time around, he has no philosophical core. He knows nothing about economics. the good thing about him is he's a cultural conservative. That's the plus for him. But even he could go for these kind of things. And actually, we have a semi-guaranteed annual income now with the $600 a week the federal government is giving to, I forget how many millions of people. When that comes to an end later in July, then what's going to happen? And listen, we just entered the trailing edge of the huge financial hurricane that started back in 2008. We just entered the trailing edge, and it's going to be a long time before we exit it.
Doug, when it comes to and I'll let you continue from there, but I'll throw this at you. When it comes to implementing, let's say, free college or forgiving college debt, which a lot of Democrats are talking about, how does that get implemented without really pissing off a lot of people who may have just paid off their $50,000 of debt or $100,000 of college debt? How do they roll something like that out without really dividing the country and just creating such a mismanagement of taxpayer funds?
Well, they can't. And of course, as I suspect you know, I don't believe the government should do anything other than protect people from physical violence. In other words, it should have a police force, and that's not the national government. It should have an army, which of course is bloated today. And it should have a court system. Other than that, government serves no useful purpose. So we shouldn't even be talking about government doing any of these crazy things. But in today's world, people look at government as a cornucopia. They think government should do everything, solve all the problems of the world. Exactly 180 degrees the opposite way to look. Look, it's going to end very badly because we've had generations of people that have gone to college, and most of what they've learned in college are things like political science, which isn't a science, and English literature, which is something you should learn on your own time. The cultural Marxists have totally taken over the education system and indoctrinated generations of kids who had empty heads when they entered college, and these authority figures tell them that the way the world works is socialism and such. It's going to be very, very hard to turn this around. In fact, I don't think you can turn it around, entirely apart from the fact that these people are going to redouble their power when the economy actually crashes and when the stock and bond markets collapse. Along with them, pension funds and insurance companies and banks. At that point, since we're already on the ragged edge of a civil war with the red people against the blue people, this is going to be chaos. So I'm glad that I'm talking to you from a large farm in Uruguay, a backward but very quiet little country.
Absolutely.
I watch all this stuff on my widescreen instead of out my front window in the US.
Good for you, Doug. Appreciate your time here at Crush the Street. We really covered a lot of things. I mean, from the economy to what's going on currently, the divide in this country, and really what is happening in precious metals. And I think that's where people can take some of their refuge and protect their wealth, because in this circumstance, what we're in, we're seeing extreme booms, extreme busts, and the markets have become an absolute casino. So, Doug, if people want to learn more about you, your content that you produce, and how they can follow you, where can they go, and what can they expect to find?
Well, go to internationalman.com, and I want to urge people when they go to that site, look at the novels, because I'm really much more interested in writing novels these days because you can say things in fiction that you actually best not say in nonfiction. Next month, I'm coming out with the third novel in the series, Assassin, which is actually rather timely, talking about political assassination. And it's going to be very, very interesting to watch what happens. But this novel, I think, is going to be, it's finished now. It's actually quite a tour de force about the history and the morality of political assassination, and a great story that we've wove with our hero, Charles Knight. So go to internationalman.com, get a copy of that book, and I don't know, talk to you in a few months, perhaps, Donegan. We'll see.
I look forward to reading the book, Doug. Everyone, I recommend you to do the same, internationalman.com, Doug Casey, everyone. Doug, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.